All right, good evening, everybody. I'm sorry to be filming in the dark, but I saw this video today and I felt like it's necessary for me to talk about it. Those who are new to my channel, you're not going to see right now, but I'm a Hasidic rabbi. I'm a Jewish person. And I'm talking about this subject not because I agree necessarily at all, really, with the situation that we're talking about, but because I care about religious freedom. And when you take away freedom from one person, you take away from everybody. And so that's why I believe in defending our First Amendment rights as being the most important thing that we do as Americans. It's our first freedom, and that includes religions that I disagree with, religions that I might even find to be disgusting, personally, that I might find to be offensive. But the First Amendment protects our rights to do things not only religious-wise, but as matters of free speech and so forth that offend people. That's really, as long as you're not hurting someone else, as long as you're not violent, that's the main thing. To offend somebody else is, there's no freedom to not be offended. There's no freedom to not feel uncomfortable. That's not a freedom in America. That's not what this is about. And this is why I feel that, a lot of things that are on the left, they're very insidious because they make it sound like they care about people being protected. They care about, when it's really about how can they get their way into destroying religious freedom, because once they can open that door, they'll do it to everybody, because the left believes that religion's the opiate of the masses. It has to be wiped out, even though religious freedom means you're free to believe whatever you want. You're free to have any religious belief, which includes atheism. And I reject the idea that atheism is not a religious belief. Sure, it might not always be an organized religion, but there are organized religious, basically, for lack of a better, churches, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about here, the use of the word church in this sense, particularly I think was kind of clickbait. But there are organizations where people gather together on a regular basis, I believe usually Sunday morning, and certainly there are those that meet Friday night and Saturday. They call themselves Humanistic Judaism, that have these kind of, that are atheist groups, and there are Christianized kind of, or culturally Christian groups like this. I think some are actually, they were Christian churches, and others are just, not affiliated, but culturally they're more similar to a Christian church. They call themselves the Society for Ethical Humanism, things like that, where they have the trappings of a church. They might sing some sort of hymns and hear some kind of a sermon and do some kind of readings and have fellowship time, surrounded by their lack of belief in anything beyond that which they can see or measure scientifically, even though science is getting closer and closer to measuring things that would be considered to be supernatural in many senses, and when we really get into that, that's a separate issue there. But in any event, there was a video on YouTube that came up on my feed from The Guardian, and it said, "This is America's last all-white church, inside America's last all-white church." And The Guardian is a British newspaper, and I guess they also have a YouTube channel where they do, short documentaries, and they had an African-American woman visiting the last all-white church in America. Now, when most people hear the word church, not all people, most people hear the word church, they assume that it's some form of Christianity that we're talking about. And here we have a building that was a church. I think they said it was a Methodist church. I'm sorry, it had been abandoned and it was for sale. And an Odinist group, an Asatru group, which is a group of people who worship the ancient Norse gods as their religion, bought this church. It's there to be their temple, and it's the third such one that this particular organization has purchased, has incorporated into their organization, and that's what we have this. And so this is being called America's last all-white church. Now, first of all, there are plenty of all-white, all-black, all-Hispanic, all-Asian churches throughout America. Not necessarily by design when it comes to the all-white, but the other groups, they are pretty much by design. That these churches are, first of all, they're ethnic churches. I'm talking about Christian churches. And then, of course, you have also, but, they won't say you're not welcome if you're not part of this racial group. But you have all of these different ethnic groups, racial groups, other cultures that have some racial or ethnic quality to them, connected to a religion. And it's the same thing, not just with Christian churches, but certainly the Nation of Islam, which has a lot of Christian ideas and Christian basis to their ideology. And then you have the various black Hebrew groups that exclude white people for the most part, although not always. And some do and some don't. And a lot of those are also Christian in nature. And then you have, of course, my own religion, Judaism. We certainly welcome converts of all different races, but it's not that common. It doesn't happen that often in certain communities. In certain communities, pretty much everyone is Jewish with a Hungarian ancestry, and then you might have some Hispanic or Latino or Latina converts. I don't use that Latinx, that's nonsense. And the same thing you have, again, on the left side, you have the all-gay churches and quote-unquote synagogues or whatever it is, where if you're a straight person, you're probably not going to be that welcome in some of these places. And again, officially, they're going to say, and again, to me, I don't believe there's any such thing as sexual orientation. I think this is something that was just made up. I believe all people are just essentially, naturally, what they would call today pansexual, and by nature, and then by nurture, they tend to take one proclivity or the other, based on, sometimes it's based on how they were raised or other things, or if they were abused, and a lot of other things that are involved in that, that people have preferences or proclivities. But naturally, if a person will, interact with anything, and then they'll have, a certain society will push them one way or the other. And the Torah teaches us that there's a proper way of sexuality, not just in the realms of heterosexuality versus homosexuality, but within the realms of heterosexuality. So, I would say that sexuality is a state of behavior. It's a state of doing as opposed to a state of being. And this was all, again, there's, the one thing that the critical race theorists get right is there really is no such thing as these races that we see. There's much more diversity within any particular quote-unquote race than there is between the various races. That's a biological fact, as well as the fact that now we have many people of mixed race, quote-unquote. There's really only one human race, and it's a central ideology of Christianity and Islam and it's certainly something is that it doesn't matter what race you are. And in Judaism, although there are certain racial ideas in Judaism or bloodline ideas in Judaism, they are we still welcome converts, and so therefore someone from another bloodline can still, even bloodlines that were banned in the Torah, our sages found a way to let them in. So the Moabites and the Ammonites, first of all, the females of the Moabites and Ammonites, the rabbis said, were allowed to convert and become part of the community and join the bloodline. And then now when it comes to the males of the Ammonites and the Moabites and the Egyptians and the Edomites and the Amalekites and all these other races or bloodlines that the Bible had some mention about, we say that once Sennacherib came and mixed all the races up, these races don't exist anymore. They've been lost to history. These cultures have been lost to history. They're not in the same place, and so there's just the people living in Moab, in the land that was the land of Moab, are not Moabites, and so they are welcome to convert. And then the Moabites who are taken to some other land, wherever the Assyrians brought them, we don't know who they are anymore, and so we say, we don't, since their identity is unknown, we don't have to worry about that. These are the types of things that Rabbinical Judaism teaches. On the other hand, we still maintain the priestly bloodlines and the Levitical bloodlines and so forth, and tribal affiliations in Judah and so forth to a lesser extent. So in any event, this particular group is not a Christian, not an Abrahamic group. It's quite strongly anti-Christian, and much more than that, they're anti-black or anti any other racial minority within the American culture. They are a religious minority that are strongly opposed to the religious majority in America. The Asatru religion is very, very anti-Christian. They see themselves as the victims of Christians, even though historically the Norse peoples invited the Christian Jesus into the Norse pantheon and were much more liberal than the Asatru Folk Assembly, which we're talking about in this video. But so that whole thing was left out of this discussion, that you have a group that is anti-Christian, very much anti-Christian. They see Christians the way that CRT sees white people, right? And they see themselves as the victims of the Christians, and a great part of that is that Christianity was invented by Jews, right? And so a certain anti-Semitic strain within these the Asatru Folk Assembly in particular, and some other similar Odinist groups. And then so this video they made it all about race. They didn't include the religious bigotry that this group has, which again, because you don't hear the Asatru Folk Assembly speak against black people. They just said this is a group for white people. That's and they want to preserve their heritage, and so therefore I don't think I don't know what their view is about interracial relationships, or if someone, but because they say that someone has to have Native European heritage in order to join the Asatru Folk Assembly. That doesn't necessarily mean that someone who is of mixed race and doesn't and has that and has some other racial qualities to them are excluded. That's not part of their charter as far as I know. I'm not here to defend them. I'm just here to be honest about what they believe and what they teach. And the kind of nefarious left-wing aspect of this video that is really seeking to, how they say, oh, they're hiding behind the First Amendment. Well, that's how things are in America. If you're in England and they have, socialized religion like they do in a lot of European countries, and to a certain extent that's how it is in England. Maybe not as strong as it is in Germany and some of these other countries, but it's there. That you have kind of, certainly there's the Church of England, which is, the Queen of England is the Pope of the Church of England. So you have that aspect of it. So in England you don't have the freedom of religion that you have. You have toleration of religion, kind of like you have in Israel. And I guess Israel and England are the most similar, because Israel got their ideas on religious tolerance from England, as opposed to religious freedom that we have in America. And so this is what I'm concerned about, is that if these people, they're not attacking black people, they're only excluding them, right? And this black woman came into their church building, but why did the Guardian have to call it a church? Why didn't they just call it a house of worship? And it's not the last, because like even they said, it's one of 3 that this particular organization has so far. And then you have the more liberal heathens, practitioners of Asatru, that have a personal beef against the Asatru Folk Assembly, right? And so they want to take away their rights, but that's not how it works in America. Meaning, in America you'll have a free market, and if people are going to see something as garbage, they're going to leave it, or they're going to have a very small group. They're not going to have, and even like the more liberal group said, they are the largest Asatru group, right? They have 5,000 members, and the Asatru Folk Assembly maybe has 500 members, right? And and people were making claims that they have connections to the KKK and other groups, and they said they don't believe the same things as the KKK. They are not, and again, you want to make comparisons to Nation of Islam, or some of the more extremist Hebrew Israelite groups. There's much more hate coming out of there, and the Nation of Islam has toned it down a bit. And they're not as hateful as they used to be in the old days. But still, they'll give lip service to, a poor white person is welcome here in the Nation of Islam. But we're all brothers here, right? We're not, they don't come, they don't show up, that much. Maybe once in a while they're welcome officially, right? But they're not there, right? That's not part of the thing. So, so the way that this is, was framing it is through the CRT lens that, well, since black people have been persecuted in America, anything that celebrates whiteness is therefore evil, and, I to me, if you're, it's one way or the other. If you can celebrate blackness, you can celebrate whiteness. I kind of subscribe more to what Norm Macdonald said, like someone said, that they're proud of their son for something that he is, I'm not going to mention. And it's not that, he went to Harvard and he became a big lawyer, a big doctor, but it's just something that, according to what this is, even though I said it's not something that a person is, they're saying it's something just a person is. So why is there a pride in just something that you are, that you don't have to? And it's the same thing. I don't believe in Jewish pride if you're not religious. I don't really believe in Jewish pride at all. I believe in Jewish humility. I remember, hearing about this idea of Jewish pride. That's not pride is sin, right? Humility is even though there is such a thing as Azus de Kedusha in Judaism, there is such a thing as holy pride. It's not just for being born a certain way, it's for living up to that And that and in a certain sense, if the Asa True Folk Assembly, which I know I've listened to some of Steve McNallen's videos on YouTube, and I even showed them in the prison, because some of the inmates, we have a few Asa True inmates, and we have an Asa True, he's Theodish Gothi, who comes in and volunteers at the prison. I'm a prison chaplain, I'm a supervisor, and he's not preaching hate. What he says is like, you can I'm not a fan of Shlomo Carlebach, but I think Shlomo Carlebach said, you can think your wife is beautiful without thinking everybody else's wife is ugly. Meaning to say, you can think your culture, your religion, whatever it is beautiful without thinking every other culture and religion is ugly, right? And the truth is, when it comes down to it, I can see in the Nation of Islam and the Odinists and all these other religions, they have some redeeming qualities. I don't buy into this Hillary Clinton ideology that people are deplorable and irredeemable. Everybody has something good on them. Didn't Anne Frank say that even, the Nazis have some good in them, right? That's what she wrote in her diary. And I know, what is it? I don't know if it was Ben Shapiro or Dennis Prager, one of them said, we shouldn't be getting our ideology. It sounds more like a Prager thing, because he believes that people are essentially evil, And so, and I'm not saying that people are essentially good, but what I'm saying is that there are redeeming qualities in almost everything. Even like I said, the CRT. As much as I find it to be deplorable, I don't find it to be irredeemable, right? They have that one good point, is that there's really no such thing as race, but then they're obsessed with race. Then they say that whiteness is bad, and I think worse than saying whiteness is bad is that CRT knocks down the black people. It tells them that they're not, being successful in the American culture is a white quality, and they shouldn't be held up to that standard. That's just nonsense. I don't get that at all. How someone cannot see that's really not only racist, but it's detrimental to people who happen to be black. So that's when they call themselves anti-racist, but they're really racist. They're racial essentialists. Their whole ideology is, and the same thing. The Democrat Party has always been racist, and so there's nothing new under the sun. The parties didn't flip, and all these things. Abortion. Why are there more black abortions than per capita than white abortions? Well, it's by design. It's because the Democrats want to lynch blacks, so they do it in the womb instead of the way they used to do it. And gun control. What does that mean? That means that the good, innocent people of color can't defend themselves from the criminals because they live in cities run by Democrats. That's why Martin Luther King was killed, because of that. So these are the things that, again, even if I don't support necessarily...
Am I like the 1,000-pound sister? Not while I'm eating.
So even if it's something that I don't support, I believe in the First Amendment. That's what it comes down to, because really, essentially, if they can get, even people who have kind of bad ideas, and that, they should be able to say that in the free market and not have their rights taken away from them unless they commit a crime. Meaning, if they are being violent against other people or something, so that's a different story. But they're not. Us True Folk Assembly, as much as I definitely disagree with their theology, definitely disagree with their religion, I definitely disagree with their ideas on race, because I believe, like I said, a black person who converts to Judaism is just as Jewish as I am. It has nothing to do with if you're black, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. white, doesn't matter. You know, your ancestors could have been Nazis, but you could convert to Judaism. You're 100% Jewish. So that's not, I don't hold people accountable for their ancestry or anything else. You know, and nothing wrong with being black or anything else. I'm not comparing being black to being a Nazi. God forbid. But what I'm saying is that what matters is what you do, and even if what you did before and you repented, I mean, I remember there was someone who had kind of a background that was not the best type of background, and they wanted to become Jewish, and someone commented on Twitter, these were two famous people. Who are you with what you used to do for a living? And she's like, first of all, I've been retired for 10 years from that, and I don't do that anymore, and I turned my life around, and I was like, as long as you're religious, and I actually was on the Bezin that converted, a famous person, based on that's how I got connected there, and so I'm not taking someone, but if these people have their views that are different than my views, who am I to judge them? It's a free country, as long as they're not hurting anybody. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment.